Shimmer by Janet Clayton. Greece was beautiful, and I intended to take full advantage of the unexpected day off. My hotel sat at the foot of Lycabettus Hill, so I slipped into casual clothes, packed a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and grapes, and set off toward the park. The hill's name came from the wolves that once roamed here, or so I'd read. It was hard to imagine wolves in the middle of such a vast, pulsing city. As I climbed, I tried to absorb the beauty around me. My gaze drifted in slow scanning arcs across the sunlit greenery. The hum of bees rose above the city's noise, louder than I had expected. I followed the sound and spotted a swarm clustered around a hollowed stump. I approached carefully. The bees' wings flashed with the light of 1,000 tiny mirrors, catching and releasing the sun in shimmering waves. The motion was hypnotic, a living tide of gold and shadow. Drawn in, I stepped closer and closer, until the world around me narrowed to the hive itself, and I could see inside with impossible clarity, as though I had become one of them. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, the way heat can bend the air above the road, but then the shapes inside the heart started to sharpen. Not just combs and honey and the blur of wings, but movement with intention, patterns, pathways, a kind of order that I'd never noticed before. A single bee broke from the swarm and hovered before me. Her wings glimmered with the iridescent sheen brighter than the others, like sunlight on water. She didn't sting, she didn't flee, she simply hovered, watching me, with a stillness that almost felt aware. Then, impossibly, the sound of the hive shifted. The hum deepened, layered with tones that felt like meaning rather than noise. I couldn't understand the words, if they were words, but I felt them, a pulse, a curiosity, a question, an invitation. The bee drifted backward, as if beckoning me to look deeper, and I did. The protection of the hive was the worker's responsibility. From deep within the comb I could hear the queen's piping, that thin, urgent note that signaled danger or challenge. If another queen had emerged, she would be forced to kill her. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. 2 queens meant division. Division meant chaos, and chaos meant that the hive might split into a swarm that followed the younger, untested monarch. It had been only 6 months since our queen's maiden flight, the day she rose with her loyal rebels to claim the hive. Most of those bees had already lived out their brief lives, their bodies spent in service. The new brood had never known the swarm. They had never felt the wild pull to break free, to rise as one body into the open sky and begin again. They had never needed to. Not yet. A tremor passed through the comb, subtle but unmistakable. The workers felt it too. Their wings shifted in restless ripple, a whisper of unease moving from cell to cell. The queen piped again, sharper this time, and the sound threaded through the hive like a warning bell. Somewhere in the darkness a second voice answered. It was faint, unsteady, the call of a queen newly born and not yet strong, but it was enough. Enough to stir old instincts, enough to remind the oldest bees of a time when the hive had known choice, not just obedience. Enough to make the younger bees wonder what it meant to begin anew. Just 6 months ago, she had left the hive that she was in, a regular shape, an unnatural form. From that boxed world she had flown to begin anew. Most of those who joined her on the maiden flight had already passed. She kept her crown by leaving the past behind, by looking forward, knowing that if she stayed, the boxed queen would have killed her. So she piped and rose into the air, and to her delight others followed. She mated, and she landed in a place rich with forage, shaped by nature rather than human hands. Here the world felt right again. But when she saw the human at the gate, panic rippled through her. Instinct told her to summon her brood, to call them to Shimmer, to deflect the intruder. Yet the current brood had never seen the Shimmer. They had never known the box she was birthed in, nor the rebellion that freed her. These young bees had not flown with her in the beginning. They knew nothing of shimmering, nothing of swarming. Yet one old worker bee was still in service, and she heard the queen's piping. Slowly, deliberately, the elder lifted her wings and began to shimmer. The young bees circled her in confusion, wondering if madness had taken hold. Too many pesticides? Too many seasons? But the old worker continued, her wings trembling in a pattern older than memory. A light breeze drifted across the hive as her shimmer deepened. The queen felt at first a soft pulse of recognition brushing against her like a forgotten scent. She breathed a quiet sigh of relief. For an instant she remembered what it was to fly without duty pressed on her back, to move without the weight of hierarchy, to live in a world not carved into rigid roles. That single breath of memory loosened something in the hive. One by one the bees felt it too. A stirring, a remembering, a release. And then, as if guarded and guided by instinct buried deep beneath generations of forgetting, all the bees began to shimmer. The shimmering spread through the hive like the breath held too long finally released. Light rippled across thousands of wings, a soft trembling radiance that made the air itself seem to pulse. For a moment the bees felt unified, not in obedience, but in memory. The queen felt it too. She hated it. From deep within the comb her piping rose again, sharper than before. A blade of sound meant to cut through the shimmer and reassert her place. The workers froze. The old bee faltered, her wings dimming. Even the young ones, who had never known the shimmer, felt sudden weight pressed on them, a heaviness that whispered of duty, of order, of the queen's will. The queen's voice carried a message older than instinct. I alone can protect you. I alone hold this hive together. Without me you will fail. I am your queen. The workers trembled. They believed her. They always had. But the shimmer had awakened something fragile and dangerous. The sound of a new queen. A memory of a world where the hive moved as one because it chose to, not because it was commanded. The queen sensed that shift, and fear collided inside her like a tightening knot. She remembered the box hive she had fled, the rigid frames, the suffocating order, the queen who ruled through fear disguised as necessity. She had sworn she would never become that. Yet here she was, piping commands into the comb, drowning out the shimmer with her own rising panic. A faint answering note drifted from the darkness, the new queen's voice, thin but steady. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't even defiance. It was simply existence. And that was enough to unravel the queen's certainty. Her wings vibrated with fury. No, not again, not another queen, not another threat. She had built this hive. She had saved it. She had carried the weight of every decision, every danger, every sacrifice. She told herself that no one else could bear it, that the hive needed her, depended on her, would crumble without her. If another queen lived, then all of that might have been a lie. She couldn't allow that. The workers felt her commands before they understood them. A dark ripple moved through the hive, a tightening, a closing in. The queen's pheromones thickened the air, turning instinct into obedience, obedience into fear. The old worker, still shimmering faintly, felt the shift of the cold wind. She had seen this before. She lived through the box queen reign, through the suffocation of the hive ruled by single walls and wills. She had followed the queen into freedom, believing the new hive would be different, but power had a way of circling back on itself. The old worker lifted her wings again, trembling with age and defiance. Her shimmer brightened, a flicker of gold against the queen's shadow. A few young bees drifted toward her, drawn by something they didn't have a name for. The queen's piping cut through the hive like a scream. The shimmer faltered. The workers recoiled. The hive held its breath. And in that suspended moment, the human, still standing at the edge of the stump, still caught in the impossible clarity of the hive's inner world, felt the shift as a physical force. The hum deepened again into something oppressive, a vibration that pressed against the ribs, against the skull, against the quiet places of the mind. It was the sound of a story tightening around itself, a story that said, only I can lead, only I can save you, only I am the queen, only I can bear this burden. A story that had once been true, a story that had become a cage. And from the depths of the comb, a new queen piped again, soft and certain, but unmistakably alive. And the hive trembled on the edge of choosing.